안녕하세요. 매일매일 운동하기를 실천하고 있는 동탄 왕코입니다. 새롭게 시작하는 1일차. 오늘은, 쉬는 날이에요. 내일도 쉬고, 내일 모레도 쉽니다. 앞으로 3일 더 쉬는데, 내일은 코로나 검사를 아침에 일찍 받고요. 그다음에 검사 결과 기다리고, 그 다음 검사 결과가 하루가 더 걸릴 수가 있어가지고, 총 2일 더 쉽니다. 그리고는 회사를 복귀를 합니다. 오늘 날씨는 매우 흐리네요. 매우 흐리고 확진자 1000명 또 넘었고 주식은 배당락 영향으로 떨어지고 있고요. 그리고 오늘은 12월 29일. 뭐 없네요. 오늘도 계속 쉴 거라서 운동을 계속 할 겁니다. 하루 종일. 운동하다가 영화도 보고 밥도 먹고 다시 또 운동하고 그렇게 할 건데 지금 이거 영상 시작하기 전에 스트레칭을 좀 했습니다. 한 20분 정도 했어요. 벌써 또 땀이 납니다. 오늘은 팔굽혀펴기랑 복근 운동을 천천히 하면서 몸을 풀게요. 지금 6일 만에 하는 운동이에요. 와, 근데 진짜 스트레칭만 해도 땀이 난다는 게 스트레칭의 효과를 다시 한번 생각해 봅니다. 자, 운동하겠습니다. 역시 운동할 땐 CNN이죠.
And I wonder whether you could just say whether you think you've seen now a whole number of corporate leaders and corporations jump on the bandwagon of these protests. Do you think it's genuine, and do you think they're going to do the hard work that's necessary to actually make a change?
Well, let me unpack that question because there are different answers to different portions of it. I did say back when I was the CEO that I didn't think corporate America had stood up and really turned into the wind to address this issue. And it was because, if you recall, 15, 20 years ago, the mantra was the CEO's job is to, enhance value for shareholders, period, full stop. When I used to say, when I was the CEO, that no, I thought we had more constituencies than just the shareholders, and those constituencies included both our employees and our communities. Many in the investor community would boo and hiss and say, "You got it wrong. Your job is to create value for shareholders." Mm-hmm. Well, I think we've arrived at the point now where the mantra is different, and people are talking they're talking the talk.
Right. Well, will they walk the walk? So I want to ask you, Darren, you mentioned how it's really important to get boards to be more representative. You know that Alex Ohanian of Reddit, the co-founder, in the aftermath of these protests, he immediately stepped down from his board and said that he wanted his position to go to a black board member, and that's exactly what happened. And I want to know what you think about that. Of course, he's married to Serena Williams, as we know, who's very vocal on the issue of equality and anti-racism. And is that sort of a start, or do you think, I mean, how many ripples do you think there will come from that example?
I think what Alex did is impressive and admirable, but the real solution is going to come when we have investors and asset managers who say to companies, we expect your boards to be diverse. So we need to hear from people like Larry Fink at BlackRock, the leaders of the large asset management firms who have power.
운동이 좀 잘 됩니다. 6일 쉬었지만
in the wake of Me Too,
와, 진짜 사람들 쉬어야 돼.
people, including Mr. Fink,
진짜 쉬어야 돼, 쉬어야 돼.
to their companies, to their investees, directing them and letting them know that they would be accountable for and assessed by how quickly they brought women onto their board and took gender into consideration. now is the time to do the same thing with respect to race.
So let me ask you, because again, you're the head of the Ford Foundation, and you know it's slightly different than corporate America, but you work with corporate America, and you've pledged, I think, $1 billion of money. Explain to me how it works, because you've taken Black Lives Matter very seriously, and in any event, you had steered the company, I think, or the foundation towards addressing inequality.
Well, I am a member of a public company board, PepsiCo, and so I have a firsthand experience and an insider's perspective on this question. But in regard to the Ford Foundation and the issue of the $1 billion bond, we made the decision that it was time to invest more money in racial justice work, to expend more money during this time of challenge for nonprofits. To give them financial resilience and the economic durability to withstand this very difficult time post-pandemic. But we believe at the Ford Foundation that one of the great challenges of our time is growing economic inequality. Inequality is bad for a democracy because it harms the heart of democracy, which is hope. Inequality asphyxiates hope. When we know that hope is the oxygen of democracy. So part of the challenge in America today is that we are seeing too many people who have been harmed by inequality, too many people who no longer believe that capitalism is the best way to organize an economy. We should be concerned, we capitalists, that the latest Pew survey of young people under the age of 39 is that only 52% believe that capitalism is the best way to organize an economy. We're almost at a point where half of young people do not believe that capitalism is the best way to organize an economy, and that's very troubling.
I want to turn to Dick, because you know I want to ask you, Dick, about some of the proposals that have been made to try to address some of this inequality. And you know, for instance, there's a company which is basically saying, you know, how about instituting unconscious bias, anti-discrimination job training, diversify hiring practices, supply chain and recruitment process, institute wage gap analysis, set quantifiable goals for diverse workforce. Dick, are those the practical steps? I mean, you mentioned the mentoring and how you got in. Are those the practical steps that have to be taken first?
Well, let me answer that. I want to wheel back into the question that you had asked before I got my machine broke down on me. You know, corporate America is now, you know, and for the last several years they've been saying, oh yeah, we have more than just shareholders as a constituency. We have employees and we have our communities. And it's been, you know, a little bit of walking the walk, but not that much. This inflection point we're at, I think now the corporations and corporate America is sort of stepping up and saying, wait a minute, we've got to get real about looking after our employee base and our communities. And people are starting to put up really substantial chunks of money to show that their, you know, their head is where their heart is. So are the things you identified the solutions or the beginnings of solutions? Let me say this. I think all of those things are good, but they're not going to result in a transformative kind of solution. You know, I was around in 1968, which was the last time we had this kind of social upheaval around race relation issues. And there was a blue ribbon panel appointed by President Johnson called the Kerner Commission, right? And their conclusion at the end of looking at all that, he said, you know, what's this all about? So they looked at it and they did a thorough study and they published a report and said, you know, this sort of social disruption and you know, community outrage is a result of, you know, racial discrimination that results in inadequate housing for blacks, inadequate or poor education, police brutality, a criminal justice system that doesn't work properly from their perspective and isn't fair, and low-wage jobs. Well, that was written in 1968. I could write that today. Still
Yeah.
true. And while a lot of good things have happened, they haven't got at the core issue. And frankly, the core issue is, our system is biased. Our system is based on, a whole system is based on a series of racially based notions and narratives that tilt the system away from blacks towards whites, and we got to get at that if we're going to have permanent transformative change.
Christian, if I may,
we read the statistics. Yes, Darren.
If I may, to Dick's very good point, I think the Kerner Commission that he refers to was shelved by President Johnson. He did not put his weight behind it because the executive summary placed the blame on white America. And the president did not think that white America was prepared to accept the burden for racism and the legacy of what we must name, and the name is white supremacy. And the legacy of white supremacy is with America today. And what has happened in these last 2 weeks with the murder of George Floyd is that deniability is no longer an option for white America. Until now, white people in America have been able to say that it isn't as bad as we say it is, or we didn't see that person actually killed by the police, so we're going to take law enforcement word for it. Well, now we know, and we saw a visual that in some ways is a metaphor for what we find in the black-white dynamic in America. A black man on the ground and a white man with his knee at his neck, who is asphyxiating him, who is literally taking the air out of his body as he cries for help. That is a metaphor for what we see in America today.
오랜만에 했더니
So then that leads me to
체력은
the
남아있는데 와
next
펌핑이
question, because it is obviously
펌핑이
the
아주 빨리
system
됩니다.
that has to be altered, not playing around at the edges, as you correctly say. And I want to ask you then to react to this. You mentioned Martin Luther King, Dick, but here is what he said in that speech. And in the language of the time, he said, "The Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty
여러분 이제
in the
슬슬
vast ocean of material
신년
prosperity.
계획
In a
목표
sense, we've
세워야죠.
come to our nation's capital to cash a check that will give us, upon demand, the riches of freedom and the security of justice." And he also went on to say that all the reforms that had been made,
2021년에는
ability to sit at the lunch
연구를
counter,
진짜
go to
열심히 할
school, this and
겁니다.
that, quote unquote, did not cost the white
연구를
system
해서
anything. There were no
픽,
expenses, no
AL
taxes. So Darren, do
취득하고요.
you think
그런
the white
다음에
system
대학원을
will agree to
가볼까
the
고민
fundamental
중이에요.
redistribution of
2022년에
resources and the
MBA
rest?
과정을 가서
I think that white
한번 해볼까,
Americans
도전을
are in a
해볼까
moment of
고민 중입니다.
retrospection and reflection, because I don't believe that white America wants to live in a racist America. I think most white people in the United States believe in fairness and justice and the
원래
ideals that are written in our founding
올해
document.
영어
But we
A를
have not lived up
치겠는데
to them. And in
코로나 때문에
order
학원도 못
for
가고
the change that you are speaking of, Christian, to
공부를
happen,
열심히 하는 것도
we
아니고
privileged people, especially those of us who have benefited from the bounty of this great nation, have to ask ourselves now, not what are we willing to give back, but what are we willing to give up?
Well,
Okay. Let me just ask you, Dick. I just need to ask you. I've got one last question to ask because I think it's clear that without the protests, none of this conversation would have happened. As awful as that, as you say, televisual lynching of George Floyd was, the protests in the streets forced this conversation, and I wonder whether you can talk about that, because that's what happened in South Africa. And you headed a company, Dick, where the majority of the, let's say, the creatives in the company, whether it's at Warner Music or elsewhere, these were black artists. What if they withdrew their labor? What if they just decided to use their leverage? I mean, that's a real, what do you say about the protests and the leverage that the black community has?
Well, as you usually do, you're spot on with your question. About the protests. Protests, the value that they bring is that they bring attention to an issue, right? They don't necessarily suggest a solution, but they bring attention to an issue. And I certainly understand the cause, the nature of the protests here. I think it was Aristotle who said that the result or the reaction to injustice is anger. And what the protests were sort of formed around was the anger at the injustice that, as Darren has aptly described, it was manifest. Now, how do we fashion solutions that take us beyond the status quo, which is kind of incremental improvement, which 3 generations from now might get us where we want to be? How do we do something to bring that to this generation? And you put your finger on it. The black community has power, not as much as the white community, but it has some power, and it can exercise some leverage. And while I don't disagree with Darren that the average American, black or white, would prefer to live in a society that gave everybody equal opportunity and where the playing field was level. The reality of life is power doesn't give it up lightly. I mean, they'll fight to keep it. So I don't think that we can lecture or sort of encourage through moral suasion white America to tilt the system. I think that blacks have to not only organize themselves to be prepared when the day comes when they have full equal opportunity, but to use what power they have to tilt the system. And we have power, as you say. I mean, black artists essentially define and lead the cultural evolution, not only in America, but in the world. There's a lot of influential power there. And I think that's one of the reasons that so many of the protesters were what you'd call millennials or younger people. Also, there are black businesses and businessmen and businesswomen who can exercise the power that they have to cause various structural barriers to be lowered or eliminated in part. But I think this is not just a case of white America transferring more of the bounty, as Darren calls it, into the black community. Housing is important, sure. Education is important, the most important. The absence of police brutality, all those things are important, but we need to exercise some power to encourage some other structural changes.
All right. Well, to be continued. Dick Parsons, Darren Walker, thank you both so much for these important conversations. Thank you very much. Now, the solidarity protests here in Britain are also about addressing this country's own racial history. Recently, statues of slave traders have been toppled. This one was thrown into a harbour. And an aptly timed new BBC drama is tackling a different scandal, Windrush, about a generation of British subjects from the Caribbean that had been wrongly detained or deported. The film, Sitting in Limbo, starts with the story of Anthony Bryan, who's been settled and living in the UK since he was 8 years old, until one night there's a knock at the door. Here's a bit of the trailer.
Open the door right now. Anthony Bryan, I'm arresting you on suspicion of being an illegal resident.
Talking about
On behalf of the Home Office.
What would be really helpful is if we could see your original passport.
I lost my job.
Would you be willing to take a paternity test?
Lost my home.
Deportation order has been issued.
50 years I've been in this country. 50 years.
The Windrush scandal. One man's fight to prove he is British.
Patrick Robinson plays Anthony Bryan, and he's joining us now. Patrick Robinson, welcome to the program. Obviously, this film was shot way before the George Floyd killing and the national and international movement that has sparked. How do you feel about this happening and airing now?
Well, it's serendipitous, I feel, because it was due to go out a lot earlier than it went out. So I suppose it's just the timing has been quite crucial to crystallize what's happening in the world. And obviously this is just one story, one scandal perpetrated by the British government.
So tell me about it. What made you want to take this role? Tell me, for viewers who might not know as much about Windrush as you do, what was the heart of the matter that attracted you to this role?
Well, the heart is because it's what you may call my heritage. I am West Indian, I'm Jamaican, and I'm part of that troupe of folk that obviously came to the UK in the late 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and I'm one of the children of that generation, if you like. So it could have been me or my elder brothers and sisters that this could have happened to. It's just by chance that I got a passport in the 1980s, and that was that. And that's kind of what says, you've got a system in place which obviously everyone is not quite aware of. If you think about people coming from the colonies, as it was then, that they didn't believe that they were part of Britain, because it was always stated that, England was the mother country and all the colonies, all the people were the British subjects. So, of course, it's something which hits home for me very, very hard, because it's part of my family.
You play Anthony Bryan, whose story is that he was here since he was 8, that he was, one day the police came and accused him of being in this country illegally, when of course he wasn't. Tell me about your preparation, meeting Anthony Bryan, and why it was so difficult for him to prove and to have the paperwork that the bureaucracy would accept.
Well, of course, it was like most jobs, you hopefully have an interview, and as far as I was concerned, when I read the script going up for the part, it was something I really wanted to be involved in, because it was a story very much linked to my heritage, and you don't get many of those stories in terms of the work, basically, which features West Indian people in Britain. So of course it was fantastic that they were actually doing this story so everyone can see, and because it's a true story, it was really important that everyone knew that this has been going on, and there's just one story that it's been going on for years, if not hundreds of years, to be honest. So it was very, very crucial for me to be involved, and like I say, it was incredible to meet Anthony and his partner Janet and his family. Because one of the things you realize is that it was really brave for him to actually tell his story. Because, we're a proud people, essentially, and it's like saying that you've failed if you've got to have to tell a story to everyone of how, how much injustice you've had to deal with, and, maybe you couldn't cope. And that's what we've all been doing for so many years, is coping and just dealing with the situation